Well, hey, Milton Presbyterian Church, Tom Coy here, your covenant pastor. This is Thursday, July 9th, and this is our midweek meditation. This week, we're going to be looking at uh, two passages on Sunday. And what I'm going to give you today are some working ideas that are in my head right now as I'm putting together our thoughts for Sunday morning. The lectionary has two different verses that I'm going to use in the sermon. One is from Matthew 13, 1 through 9, uh, and 18 to 23. And this is the story of the parable of the sower. Jesus says that a sower goes out to sow and casts seeds in a broadcasting fashion. Some seeds fall on a hardened path, some on rocky soil, some in the midst of thorns, and others on the good soil of the field. And what happens, of course, is that all but one of those locations proves to be unfruitful in terms of growing the seed. On the path, the birds take away the seed, and the shallow soil, the rocky soil, the plant springs up, but then it withers in the sun because there is no root. In the thorns, it grows a little better, but then the thorns themselves choke out the seed. But the seed that falls on good soil puts down roots, puts up shoots, and bears fruit. So it's successful. And Jesus then goes on to say that um, that the the parable is about receptivity of our hearts. Uh, Four different kinds of receptivity. One is a hardened heart. That's the hardened path, and that cannot really receive the seed. And so the birds come away and take it away. The second is the heart that is a bit open to the word, but doesn't go very deep in terms of its receptivity. And so the seeds sprout up, but because there's no real rootage, they wither in the sun. So the word is there for a while, but then goes away. The third kind is better soil. Thorns are already growing there, but the thorns compete with the seed. The seed grows, but the seed can't really flourish because it's choked out by the thorns, or as Jesus says, the cares of the world. And finally, there's the receptivity of good soil. It's like good soil. It's deep, and the seed has a chance to put down roots and then grow and flourish. Those are the folks who hear the word and it really makes an impact, and they're able to take that word and give it back in the ways they live their lives and how they conduct themselves. So that's that parable. Now, what I'm working on is more than just simply explaining that, because the question comes up, why is there good receptivity sometimes to the word, and why do sometimes we not have good receptivity at all? What's preventing us from receiving the word gladly all the time? What gets in the way? This is where the second passage comes in. It's from Romans 8, 1 through 11. And Paul is talking here about the condition of the human being, which is we are made of flesh. That's the key word he uses, flesh, to denote our humanness, our normal package, our way of looking at the world. We're all human beings. We all have certain drives and desires and issues that are, well, common to us all. We see things from a human point of view. That's what flesh means to Paul. He contrasts that with spirit. Spirit is the thing that God gives us. Spirit is of God. And when it is added to us, it helps us to see things from God's point of view. It helps us to be filled with the power to do things as God would have us do them. It takes us from our fleshly existence and moves us into a whole different paradigm, a whole different perspective. where we see things from God's point of view. So Spirit added to our fleshly lives allows us then to be people of God, or as Jesus would say, seeds that grow and yield 30-fold, 50-fold, 100-fold in production. That's fertility. And then what I'd like to do with that in mind is go on to illustrate in several ways how we can look at the same thing but with two different perspectives. We look at the same thing but with two different perspectives. And let me illustrate. When I look at an object, say a stop sign, 300 feet away, I see a rather blobby red something. I don't know what it says. I mean, I can kind of tell because it looks like a stop sign, so I know that. But if I did not know that, it would be very hard for me to tell you what it is. Why? Because I am nearsighted. My normal condition is nearsighted. I can see things close up pretty well. But when it comes to seeing things further away, I need these. I need glasses to help me see what's out there. Use this as an example. My normal condition is what Paul might call flesh. This is my normal way of looking at things. My normal way of looking at things does not include seeing things far away because that's just not part of my package. Add in an exterior corrective like eyeglasses, and now I can look down the street and see that is a stop sign coming because I can see the letters STOP, and I know that stop sign is for me. I have a better view of the world because of this. That's what we're looking at here in the world of faith. We look at the world as human beings, and it's perfectly acceptable. But what we don't see very well is what God is about. In fact, we hardly see God at all, or God's works, or God's actions, or God's, we don't hear also God's voice very loudly. But with the Spirit from God added to us, now we begin to see where God is, what God's about. We hear God better, and we can respond more fruitfully to what God has to say. And there's great example, and this is just one example. I'll have more on Sunday, but a very good example is just simply how the world looks at Jesus and how people of faith, guided by the Spirit, look at Jesus. The world generally sees Jesus as a historical figure, a good man who grew up 2,000 years ago and had quite a successful career preaching, but he ran into trouble with authorities, and they didn't like what he said, and so they had him die on a cross, and he was buried, and that was the end of the story. It was a sad end to a good man. That's how the world, the flesh, tends to look at Jesus. Always has, always will. But when we add in the perspective that comes from the Spirit, when the Spirit is part of us, we now look at that very same man from long ago, and what we see is more, much more, than what the human part of us would see. We see in him, yes, a human form, a human being, just like us in every way, except he does not sin, and even more, he has divine qualities. Even more, his message is not just street corner preaching. His message truly is an authentic word from the divine. And it helps us to understand the mind of God, the will of God. It helps us to understand what it means to live as people who are truly believers in God. And we see in him the miracles. We see in him the dynamic preaching. We see in him his death. But we also see his resurrection, ascension, and we see in him one who reigns in glory and prays for us as an intercessor. We have this added in perspective to Jesus because of the Spirit. The Spirit helps us see what our own fleshly perspective, our own fleshly eyes cannot. See, the Spirit is like corrective lenses. It helps us to see what we normally cannot. So this helps, I think, to talk about why do some seeds fail? Why do some attempts at preaching fail? Why does the word fall on rocky soil or a hardened path or thorns and chokes out? Well, that's kind of our fleshly stuff getting in the way. But when the Spirit has opened our hearts, the seed, the word, falls on good soil, puts down roots, and it goes to town and bears a remarkable, bountiful harvest. Well, those are the musings right now on Thursday morning. Tune in on Sunday and let's see what other illustrations may evolve to illustrate the work of the Spirit on our hardened and rocky human hearts. Take care. God bless.